And we have liftoff. Welcome aboard to another edition of the Blue Files, the extended edition. Hello, my name is Anwar Knight, your host. It's great to have your company today. This is a web series that highlights various stories about our changing planet, in many cases how it interconnects with our daily lives. And to help me share some of those stories, a warm welcome to our West Coast contributor, Christina Stevens. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderfully well. It's warm outside. There was a warm welcome. What else could a person ask for, really?
Well, I think we almost want to slow things down. Canada Day is just around the corner.
Yes.
I think we want to now let this simmer,
Yes,
no?
just let summer take its course. Easy does it.
Take its course. Well, let's get into a star-powered start with multi-Oscar winner Leonardo DiCaprio. He's lending a helping hand to help the Galapagos Islands. Tell me about
Well, he is. I love it when big stars get involved in things like this, and he is known for a lot of environmental work. So DiCaprio is working together with a coalition of about 40 groups. Together, they're spending $43 million to help restore natural habitats in the Galapagos Islands. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar, those are some islands just off of Ecuador, and they're famous for their diversity, all the different wildlife, both on land and in sea. And of course, perhaps the most famous visitor there, a celebrity in his time maybe, Darwin, who did his theory of natural selection, was conceived there. So this is pretty important stuff. It's an exceptional place, so that's why it's so important that work is done. So one of the islands that has taken the worst hit is Floriana Island. So they're starting there and they're going to reintroduce 13 species that have gone extinct, and they're going to help increase the population of the island's 54 threatened species. Elsewhere, they're working on restoring the endangered pink iguana. They're also strengthening their marine reserves. Even though it is a biosphere protected by UNESCO, it's been overrun by foreign fishing fleets, so that's a challenge as well. So it's a big project, but so exciting, and I'm sure a lot of great visuals will come out of this as well to see the kinds of things they're working on.
Yeah, without question. And, it is interesting because I think we're all familiar with the term the Galapagos Islands, and we may be familiar with some of the images and video of it, but it really is a fascinating place. And as you mentioned, it's about 1,000 kilometers off the coast of Ecuador. There's over 100 islands, and this one in particular, the Floriana Island, it's interesting. People who live there, only about 150 people, but in the region, 250,000 people, visit there. You mentioned about overfishing, also tourism, so it's rupturing.
It is. It's surprising because 97% of the land on the islands, it's all part of a national park. Yeah. And as I mentioned, the surrounding waters, UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. So it seems hard to believe that there could be this much damage, but that's what humans do. And I mean, ecotourism is important. It's an important part of their life, their important income. But, a lot of that you have to look at how it's being done, for sure.
And the pink iguana, some say it's one of the oldest species on the planet. Less than 200, they're speculating, still left. So this is one of the initiatives that they're trying to do there. In fact, the efforts that are being put forward, he sort of, released the reins, if you will, to this one vet. And she has extensive experience in island restoration, Paula Castano. And I found it interesting that he is letting her take over his social media channels, Instagram and Twitter, to get this story out. But she cited, some tangible achievements that have been done already in the past, to earmark that something can be achieved with what Leonardo is trying to do in terms of providing the funding. She cited one of the other islands they rid it of invasive rodents. And as a result of that, they saw a tortoise species, new hatchlings were discovered, so already repopulation. So I think that is one of the most significant takeaways when I was reading up on her, that this is not, far off, decades from now. Something can be done in the short term, and the benefits can certainly be verified in near term. So this is really a good news scenario all around.
Oh, absolutely. You mentioned DiCaprio handing over his social media to her. That is no small favor. To give you an idea, he has about 86 million followers across his social media platforms. So consider the reach of that, and to generalize, younger people who are getting involved and who are becoming more active. So all of the awareness that's growing out of that and the information the vet can share through those channels, it is pretty exciting, actually.
He has the influence, he has the money, he's putting his Hollywood superpowers to good because he doesn't have to do it. So I think this is really something. So I think we all need to acknowledge that he could just sort of lay away on a beach and enjoy the rest of his future, as a retired actor. I'm sure other projects are coming, but he really is concerned and he's making a very powerful impact.
Oh, absolutely. A couple of quotes coming out of some different stories on this. He was talking about how human beings have degraded 3/4 of the wild places on Earth and pushed more than 1 million species to the brink of extinction. If you can believe 1 million species. So, of course, starting a place like Galapagos, where there's such a diverse variety, it's kind of the perfect start. And also for this project, they're starting with a couple of islands. Over the next decade, they're going to have 24 islands done and expand, expand, expand. So it's the tip of the iceberg, if you will.
Well, we look forward to following that because it really is a very crucial part of the global ecosystem. It's been described as the melting pot of marine species. So I thought it was very cool. So thank you for that. We're going to shift gears a little bit, though, and we're going to highlight a startling report that highlights the waste that Amazon is producing each week. We're talking hundreds of thousands of items simply thrown away to make room in their warehouse facilities. And this comes from the British network ITV. They obtained a video from an ex-employee who was working at a warehouse in Scotland, and he showed video proof documents of the destroy file. So on a computer screen, all the items that were marked to destroy. And according to him and some of the video that he provided, the target at this one warehouse in Scotland, Friday to Friday, so in 1 week, 130,000 items were to be destroyed every single week, and that's in one warehouse. Now, I did some checking. There's about 185 warehouses around the world. So can you imagine the impact that this is having on so many levels? And, one question, judging on your face, why is this happening?
Well, and I'm thinking, what does it say in there? What kinds of things? I mean, to even
Yes.
comprehend the destruction of that many things, I mean, what are we talking about?
You name it, it's there. Smart TVs, laptops, drones, hair dryers, jewelry, in some cases PPE equipment, books. It goes on. And the video is showing, and again, backing up by this ex-employee, about half of it's still in its shrink wrap. It hasn't been opened, and the other half likely returned. Some of them will not be usable, but certainly others that could be repurposed. And what it comes down to is just simply shelf space, which is just
So
astounding.
couldn't they just hand it off to a charity of some kind, a good cause? And wouldn't that actually even
Yeah.
be cheaper than taking the effort to destroy it and dispose of it?
Well, you would think that. Now, certainly Amazon did have, a statement, and they said that they're working on a goal to zero product disposal, aiming to resell and donate to charitable organizations. They didn't say a target date, and I think part of this is damage control because they've been outed on it now. But I think the problem is, we have to remember Amazon doesn't really make much on the product itself. Firstly, very rarely will they make their own product. They have a signature brand. They make the money on selling that product for vendors, the shelf space or warehouse space, and the delivery. So that's all they care about. The takeaway, the product really doesn't mean anything to them. In fact, it costs them if it's sitting in a warehouse and the vendor isn't selling it to consumers. And this is part of the problem. A Greenpeace activist said that when you look at Amazon's business model, if this continues, this disposal culture, it's only going to get worse. And he's suggesting that government legislation should be implemented right away. It needs to stop because it really is only going to get worse. And I think because of COVID, of course, I mean, Amazon is the biggest e-commerce business on the planet, and it exploded over the last 15 months.
It also, I think things like this, we're getting some public information out there. I worked at retail during university at an unnamed, we'll just leave it unnamed clothing store. When the next season came, if things didn't sell, if there were extras, we actually had to sit in the back and slice them up before they threw them out because they didn't want anyone that they felt didn't represent their brand wearing their clothes with the label on. And that's horrible. Pretty much all of the retailers did until the public started finding out about this. Now most of them donate to charities, donate to homeless causes, those kinds of things. So I think public pressure might, have as much of an impact as those regulations.
Well, I think you're probably right. Ultimately, and we've circled back to this, that it's up to consumers. I think you're right. And I, by no means am I pointing fingers. I have shopped on Amazon without question. But I think now we can start making different decisions. Like me, in our family now, the option, not on all products, but they will say, do you want to hold off expedited shipping so you can use less packaging and wait maybe for another product to come in? I opt for that, absolutely. I've also opted, again, not all products offer it, but do you want less packaging? I don't need the big fancy thing. If you want to put it in a Ziploc bag, I'm okay with that. Some people may not be. As long as the product is what it's supposed to be and it's new and all that sort of thing, I'm okay with that. But I think the model in itself is a problem. Bezos doesn't really care about the product. He cares about making money on selling and the warehouse, as I said before. And I think that needs to change. And legislation certainly would go a long way for that. Part of the issue is that a lot of the laws that are on the books now were based on old commerce, brick and mortar stores. And the reality is, you mentioned one example, and it likely was a very large retailer. But if you go back 50, 60 years, the waste, I don't know, how much could they possibly be throwing out? Because at that point, when you were doing retail industry, you are buying the product. So now the product is yours and you want to limit your loss. So I'm not going to throw away unless I have to. But this is different now. E-commerce has changed the way we do business. So I think everything needs to be updated. In Europe, for instance, and I don't know about North America, but I was able to confirm in Europe, there are no regulations or laws that a company, a business organization needs to be accountable on how much are they wasting or disposing every year. It's just not there. But in Germany alone, it's estimated 7 billion euros a year of products are being destroyed. And that's
Doesn't
a problem.
that seem insane? They're new. Somebody can use them,
Yeah.
right?
And,
I mean,
Sorry, and I was just going to say, and we have to remember, it's not just the product itself that is, not being repurposed, but the product when it was made, that's natural resources, those are carbon emissions, that's labor, all of that just to get the product to the warehouse in the first place. And then at the end, it's for nothing just to go in the garbage waste. And I'll just add in, ITV, the reporter, did do some tracing. Some of the electronics did end up at a waste facility, which is at least good that, the poisons that are in the metals and all that are going to be taken out. But a lot of it just ended up at a landfill site. And again, this is one warehouse in Scotland. So it really makes you scratch your head. And I think this has to change, and it has to change rapidly, just knowing how e-commerce has changed in the last 2 years.
it's grown so fast. Maybe that's part of the problem.
Maybe.
That they are still searching for answers. Maybe we'll take Amazon at its word that it actually does have a serious goal and is serious about this. This isn't just for PR that they're responding.
Well, let's hope that, now that it's out, there's going to be a big spotlight put on it. And you can bet, organizations like Greenpeace, they're going to certainly keep the fire underneath their feet, and rightly so. Let's get into our last one, though, our last story here for this episode. And let's go fishing. Our next story is of interest to anglers. And we're not talking just hobby or sport or professional. All across the board, if you partake in fishing, climate change is having an impact on that.
Not just an impact. Basically, climate change is killing fish. That's what this study is telling us. And it's great to put a tangible impact, like you mentioned. So if you fish pretty much in any lake, anywhere, this is going to impact you. So I'm no scientist. So to really simplify it, okay, so global warming, there's warmer air. That reduces the transfer of oxygen to the water, and then that in turn boosts algae blooms, which then consume even more oxygen. So in the end, those plunging oxygen levels, they suffocate the fish. It's that simple. So a study of the University of Regina finds also, not surprisingly, there will be a trickle-down effect on all kinds of other life that's in lakes, as usually happens with these kinds of things. To give you an idea of how bad it is, so that they tracked all the oxygen levels from 1980 to 2017. Oxygen levels in lakes fell by an average of about 5% near the surface, and 19%, so that's 19% in
Wow.
deeper waters. And those deeper waters are usually where the bigger fish are that
Hmm.
maybe some of the sports fishers would be looking for. And
Wow.
right here in Canada, Saskatchewan Lake was identified by researchers as being in the top 15 of 383 lakes studied. It's average losing oxygen by about 10% a decade. So,
Hmm.
again, talking intangibles, this isn't,
Yeah.
100 years away, 200 years away. This is within our
Happening now.
lifetimes. We can see this happen. And I do want to mention it's an issue on some lakes around here. It also impacts swimmers and people just out enjoying the lake because
Yeah.
certain algae blooms, they can be toxic. So you don't want your dogs in the water,
Yeah.
drinking the water. You don't want to be swimming in the water. So, it's got a big impact.
It really is. And going back to the science of it, when we talk about global warming, the oceans, basically is a heat sink. It's soaking up the planet's heat. So that's why the oceans are one aspect. And then for fresh waters like lakes, if you have a warming, climate, that means less snow, less ice cover, shorter ice periods. So that means the water levels drop. But it means that the water then is heating up. And as you mentioned, algae grows. And that is going to choke off the oxygen for fish. And we have to remember, you know, hobby fishing is one thing, but the sport fishing industry, I mean, it's $100 billion industry in the U.S. alone. There's over 800,000 people that are employed in that industry. Marinas, tackle shops, hotels, fishing gear manufacturers. So this just isn't, Sunday I'm going fishing with the kids, as a pastime. There is an industry, and I know that industry is concerned with reports like this because
Oh, absolutely. And it's
short
sustenance.
term.
Some people fish, I mean, for fun. Some people it's to eat, right?
Yeah.
Another aspect, so you mentioned the oceans. According to this study, it does impact oceans, but not nearly as quickly. That's not the same kind of concern at this point as lakes. So the other part of it, I mentioned it, the oxygen is decreasing at faster levels in the deeper waters where those
Yeah.
big fish are that the sports fishers might want. But what is also happening, it's that scary word invasive species. A lot of what is disappearing being replaced with invasive species, and then who knows what happens, right? What are the other impacts and the other impacts and the other impacts? So that's it's a big deal.
Now, was there anything in the reports and the science on this on ways to slow it down? Is there some solutions? Because long term, of course, it's let's combat climate change, right? The heating of our planet. But no matter what we do, the output of that is still going to be decades away, even if we manage to do our tasks now. So, what could they do in the short term? Any solutions?
There is a solution, but it's very challenging because it's lake by lake. It's basically there are these water pumps that have been devised specifically to boost water circulation and thereby oxygen. But they're not cheap and they only generally work on smaller lakes. So to think lake by lake, and some are of course very remote, to be able to put in oxygen pumps, it's not an easy or a quick solution or fix, and it's I mean, to be blunt, it's not going to happen in that many lakes. Again, I've seen it happen in recreational areas where people also swim. And so there's a lot of public pressure. Hey, we want to use our lake, that kind of thing. But the bigger picture, I mean, look at a map of Canada and all the lakes and out in the prairies. I mean, you're not going to run around putting water pumps on all of those. So,
No.
yeah, to even say it's a short-term solution,
Right. And who covers that cost? If you have it at a local conservation area, I mean, you'd have to have a bunch of municipalities that say, yes, we're going to, take that initiative on. And it's an ongoing cost, the hydro to run that pump. How big is the pump? All those sort of things, the care and maintenance of that pump. I guess the short answer is realistically no. I mean, they might be able to do it in some aspect, but is it really going to have a huge impact? Likely not. So that's really interesting. And, the other thing is separating ourselves from the Great Lakes and just an overall picture. Fish is the staple of protein for millions of people around the world. If you look at it, For global populations, it's under 20%. But if for those countries and coastal islands that really live on the ocean, it's 70% of their intake. Their protein comes from fish. And the reality is, this is one of those studies that says that the amount of seafood that humans can harvest is simply shrinking. And that's going to be a problem, not just, as we mentioned, for somebody who wants to do some sport fishing, because it doesn't stop there. It may start there, on a daily basis, that we're starting to realize that, but it's indicative of how it's going to continue to ramp up. And that will definitely impact daily lives around the world.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I come back to, we talked about it just a minute ago, but all these other invasive species, which could come in and replace these fish, and then the whole ecosystem, it gets going and going.
And it doesn't
a scary
stop.
Situation. Yeah.
It is. Well, we're going to continue to follow that story as well. Thank you so much, Christina. Always a pleasure to have you aboard. You're a longtime supporter here of Big Blue Marble Team, so we appreciate it, and we wish you a great day.
My pleasure. Talk to you soon.
All right, Christina Stevens joining us from the West Coast, our West Coast contributor. If you've enjoyed what you're watching, please support what we're trying to do here. Like and subscribe. And, of course, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram. We post regular updates. And join me on my Facebook page for our weekly Here and There show that streams live every Friday at 1 p.m. I want to thank you for your time today. We hope to have your company again on another edition of the Blue Files, the extended edition. Stay safe and be well.